The gunshot hit the mirror behind the bar before anyone in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel heard the sound that made it. 200 people, every senator's donor, every hedge fund architect, every charity board chairperson in Manhattan, dropped into animal panic simultaneously. Crystal wine glasses completed $300 of arc before hitting Italian marble. A woman in Givenchy lost a heel running toward nothing in particular. Somewhere behind a column, Alderman Wallace had folded himself under a table and was making deals with a god he had not sincerely addressed since 2003. And in the center of all of it, Clara Jenkins stood perfectly still. She stood still because Damian Rossy's arm was around her, pressing her back against his chest with the calm, absolute authority of a man who had been shot at before and had long ago decided it was not a reason to stop thinking clearly. His other hand had produced a weapon that Clara did not examine closely. His jaw was granite, and his heartbeat, which she registered through the back of her hand where it pressed against his chest, was completely steady. Not fast, not elevated, steady. "Stay behind me," he said. And Clara Jenkins, who had arrived at this gala 3 hours ago, telling herself she would do her job, survive the evening, and go home without encountering Derek Vance, thought, "None of this would have happened if my ex-boyfriend had kept his mouth shut." If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. And stay right there, because you are exactly where you need to be. This is the story of a woman who thought the worst thing that could happen to her tonight was a bad encounter with the man who spent 3 years trying to convince her she was not enough. She had absolutely no idea she was about to become the most protected woman in New York City. Like this video right now if you love a story where the villain gets what he deserves. Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. This channel has viewers from Lagos to London to Los Angeles, and we want to know you are here. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now before we go any further. Because the story you are about to hear does not end the way you think it does. 3 hours and 49 minutes before the chandelier incident, Clara Jenkins was standing in front of her bathroom mirror in her apartment in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, telling herself she looked fine. She did more than look fine. The floor-length gown was deep plum, cut by a tailor on Flatbush, who understood that curves were not a problem to be minimized, but a geography to be honored. The fabric moved. Her natural hair was pinned with 2 curls loose at her temples. Her skin, warm, dark brown, luminous in the yellow bathroom light, held the evening like polished cherry wood holds the afternoon sun. She was 31 years old, had a master's degree, 2 industry awards, and a cat who respected nothing and no one. She looked extraordinary. She knew it. She was terrified anyway. Because Derek Vance was going to be at the Plaza tonight. She had known the moment her boss, Reginald Ashford of Ashford and Blake Public Relations, had handed her the assignment 2 Tuesdays ago, with that particular adjustment of his cufflinks that preceded bad news, the annual Manhattan Business Council charity gala. One of their most important clients on the guest list, senior account executive required, that was her. "Is Derek Vance presenting?" she had asked, the cufflinks again. "He is the keynote speaker." She had taken exactly 4 seconds to consider her resignation. Then she had booked the tailor, taken the job, and spent 12 days reminding herself that she was a professional adult with no remaining feelings about a man who had once told her she ate too much for someone her size. The cab ride from Crown Heights to Midtown took 40 minutes in Friday traffic. She spent 37 of them watching the East River from the window, and 36 of them not thinking about Derek at all, which she counted as a success. The plaza on Fifth Avenue looked the way it always did, like a building that had decided to be simultaneously a crown and a fortress, and had never seen any reason to choose. The entrance was lined with black town cars, men in architecture-grade suits, women in things that cost what Clara paid in annual rent. She showed her invitation to the doorman and walked through the brass doors with her back straight and her pulse where it had no business being. The grand ballroom was 3,000 square feet of New York announcing itself, chandeliers like suspended waterfalls, white linen and centerpieces that had cost someone a sleepless night, a string quartet in the corner, playing something that implied elegance without committing to a specific decade. 200 people in choreographed orbit, performing wealth for each other, with the focused dedication of professionals. Clara took a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and went to work. That was the thing about her job that nobody understood from the outside. It looked like socializing, and it was actually surveillance. She mapped the room, identified the client's 3 key media contacts, noted which journalists had arrived, who was circling whom, which conversations had the weight of things that mattered versus things that merely sounded important. She was excellent at this. She had always been excellent at reading rooms. She was cataloguing the room's eastern quadrant when she felt it, the particular shift in the air that preceded a thing she did not want. She turned. Derek Vance had not aged in the way people age. He had simply increased, like a substance that concentrates as it sits. Still tall, still blonde, still carrying the expression of a man who had decided in college that he was the main character of every room and had encountered no evidence sufficient to revise this. Navy suit, a tie in the shade that boutiques call midnight, but which was simply blue. He had already found her with his eyes. She saw that before he saw her see it, which was its own kind of power she held quietly. On his arm, Chloe Vanderwall. Clara knew the name. Manhattan's social circuit was a small city. Chloe Vanderwall, blonde, constructed, the heir to a real estate dynasty, the face of 3 charity boards she had never attended. The woman who had, at a mutual dinner 18 months ago, looked at Clara's dress and said, so brave, in the tone that transformed 2 words into a wound that took a shower to wash off. Clara turned toward the far door. She was not quite fast enough. Clara. The voice, carrying the particular musicality of a man who had learned that cruelty lands harder when it sounds casual. I didn't know they'd given plus-size tables tonight. The group around him, 3 finance men, a woman in red, went quiet with the practiced alertness of people who smelled sport. Clara stopped. She turned. She kept her face the way she kept her face at press junkets and difficult client calls, and every room that had ever tried to make her smaller than she was. Hello, Derek. You look... He paused. The pause was a technique. She had studied it for 3 years and only understood its mechanics after she left. Bigger, he finished, and tilted his head like a man remarking on the weather. I didn't think that was still possible. Derek, Chloe murmured at his arm, a slight smile. That's almost harsh. But she was watching Clara with the bright, still attention of an audience. She knows I'm honest, Derek said, turning to his group with the ease of a performer finding his crowd. "We were together 3 years. I was always honest with her, always told her she could be exactly what she wanted to be if she just—" The gesture, the one that required no words. Clara had seen it in private 100 times, and never from a distance. From a distance it looked like something different. It looked like what it was. And she felt, in that precise moment, the last of something leave her body that she had not known was still there. The last residue of shame, of self-questioning, of wondering whether he had been right. It came out of her cleanly, like a splinter finally worked loose, and in the space it left behind was not pain, but cold, structural clarity. "Derek," she said. He looked at her. "In 3 years you never once made me feel as small as you're trying to right now." She held his gaze. "The interesting thing is that you're the one who came smaller." She looked at Chloe. "Good luck. You're going to need it far more than you currently understand." She turned and walked, not running. Walking, measured, deliberate, through the crowd and past the quartet, and through a service corridor she had clocked during her initial map of the room, up 2 flights via a staircase that the hotel kept clean for the staff who serviced the private upper levels, and through a final door that opened onto the Crown Terrace. The terrace was the top floor of one of the plaza's historic towers, open to the sky, stone railing along the edge overlooking Fifth Avenue, and the dark, breathing geometry of Central Park. The air was October cold and sharp. She thought it was empty. It was not. A man stood at the far railing, with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, looking out at the city, the way people look at things they own. He was tall. The suit was charcoal, and so precisely fitted that the shoulders appeared to be an architectural decision rather than a garment. He did not move when the door opened. "I thought this was empty," Clara said. "It was," he said. His voice was unhurried, deep, with the geological patience of something that had been forming for a long time. New York accent, but under it something older. Italian, she would place later. "It can still be empty, if you prefer." "I'll only need a minute," she said. She went to the opposite railing, as far from him as the terrace allowed. Manhattan at night was the only thing she knew that could make a person feel simultaneously too small and fully alive. The park below her was a dark rectangle breathing quietly. The Upper East Side glittered across it. Somewhere south, the financial district burned cold and white like a circuit board left on. She gripped the railing. She would not cry. She had made a rule about Derek 18 months ago, standing in her kitchen at 2 in the morning with a glass of water and the particular clarity that comes after long exhaustion. She would not cry over him again. She had kept that rule through 8 hard months, and she was going to keep it in a hotel terrace in Manhattan with the city watching. "You're shaking," the man said. "I'm fine." "You are gripping that railing hard enough to leave impressions in the stone," he said, in the tone of someone who has never been successfully lied to. Something happened in that room. "It's nothing," she said. She hated her own voice. She cleared her throat. A pause. Wind off the park. "I'll offer you a trade," he said. "One true thing from my evening. One true thing from yours. After that, if you want me to vanish, I'll vanish." Clara turned to look at him for the first time. Her brain catalogued several things simultaneously. The face, sharp jaw, dark eyes, the kind of bone structure that looks like it was proposed and approved by separate committees. The quality of his attention, which was the attention of a man who had been in enough rooms to know which things in a given room mattered, and was currently directing all of it at her. The fact that he was not performing anything. He was simply standing there, looking at her, interested in the answer. And then, with the specific recognition of someone who reads the business press, she placed him. The Times. A profile from 2 years ago. The name on a file that had come across her desk at Ashford and Blake 6 months ago. A reputation management inquiry that had been withdrawn within 48 hours without explanation. Damian Rossy, founder and chairman of the Rossy Group, residential and commercial development, 12 city blocks across the 5 boroughs, 4 properties in New Jersey, interests in 3 other states, and beneath that, in the particular register in which certain things were discussed in certain circles, a name that carried the specific weight of a family that had been building and protecting things in this city for 3 generations, not all of those things visible from the street. "Your turn," she said, deciding that calm was more functional than the alternative. The corner of his mouth moved. "I am avoiding Alderman Wallace, who wants me to invest in a waterfront development that I happen to know is a money laundering vehicle, because a detective named Harrison told him, I don't know that. I have been standing up here for 22 minutes, hoping Wallace gets drunk enough to forget I was ever in the building." The laugh was out of her before she could stop it. It came from somewhere genuine and arrived at volume, and she put her hand over her mouth half a second too late. Damian Rossy looked at her with something that rearranged itself into warmth. "Now you," he said. Clara looked back at the city. The cold moved through her. "My ex-boyfriend," she said, "just told a group of people at a charity gala that I am too fat, in front of his new girlfriend, in front of people I work with." A pause. "He always used to do it privately. I'm not sure what it means that he's willing to do it in public now." The silence that followed was not the same silence as before. It had mass. She turned and found him looking at her with an expression she would spend a long time learning, the full grammar of. Controlled fury worn very quietly, the way a furnace sounds from outside a wall. "His name," he said. "Why?" "Because a man who does that in public," he said, "has decided he is untouchable. In my experience, men who decide they are untouchable have simply not yet met the appropriate correction." Clara studied him. "You don't know me." "I know what I can see from here." He looked at her, steady, unhurried. "You have a graduate degree. The way you described the situation, you went straight to analysis. Most people in pain reach for emotion. You reached for pattern recognition. That's graduate training." He paused. "The gown is bespoke. You don't earn custom tailoring in this city at your age without being very good at what you do. And you made a rule about not crying over him, and you've kept it." Something almost like respect moved through his voice. He lost something he had no idea he was holding. Clara stood with that for a moment. The wind came off the park, and the whole city breathed. "That is either the most accurate cold reading anyone has ever done," she said, "or the most elegant opening line I have ever received." "It can be both," he said, the corner of his mouth. "His name." "Derek Vance," she said. She did not fully understand why she said it. She told herself later it was the air and the altitude, and the fact that he had looked at her without once trying to solve her, or redirect her, or make her easier to be around. She said it, and she watched him repeat it quietly, the way someone repeats a thing they intend to remember precisely. He offered her his arm. "You came here to do a job," he said. "Let's go do it." She looked at his arm. She thought about Derek's expression when he had made the gesture with his hand, and she thought about the expression on this man's face when she had told him what happened, and the distance between those two expressions was roughly the distance between Crown Heights and the top of a hotel tower where the air was cold and clear, and the whole city was underneath her. She took his arm. The effect of Damian Rossy returning to the plaza's grand ballroom with a woman was, in the language of the room, a complete atmospheric event. The quartet didn't stop. It stumbled. Conversations died at the radius of 15 feet and rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. The cluster of people who had watched Derek Vance perform his cruelty 40 minutes earlier turned as one and found themselves looking at Clara Jenkins. Clara, in her plum gown, chin level, spine arranged the way the building had always wanted it arranged, entering on the arm of a man who moved through a room the way a weather system moves through a coast. Leon materialized at Damian's left side from what appeared to be nowhere. He was broad, Jamaican-American, immaculate in black, and possessed of the specific energy of a man who had witnessed everything twice and found it all, on balance, mildly entertaining. He looked at Clara. He looked at Damian. He looked back at Clara. "Good evening," he said, 2 words containing 17 unasked questions. "Don't," Damian said pleasantly. "I wasn't," Leon said. "You were about to. I genuinely was not going to say a single—" Clara pressed her lips together to stop the laugh. She failed. It came out quietly, and Leon shot her a look of pure, immediate approval. Derek was at the bar. Of course he was at the bar. He had the posture of a man in the middle of a story, chin slightly elevated, Scotch glass held the way men hold Scotch glasses when they want their hands to look considered. Chloe Vanderwall was at his side, tracking the room over his shoulder with the vigilance of someone who measures social power the way a barometer measures pressure. Chloe saw them first. Clara watched the specific mechanics of it, Chloe's fingers tightening on Derek's sleeve, Derek registering the pressure, turning mid-sentence, and finding himself looking at something his central nervous system had not prepared him for. The story he had been telling finished itself in his mouth, and lay there. Damian moved at a pace designed to be watched, each step unhurried and deliberate, and exactly as loud as it needed to be. "Mr. Vance," he said, when they stopped. His voice was the most pleasant sound in the room, and the most frightening. "I don't believe we've been introduced." Derek went through 3 colors in 4 seconds. The particular gray of understanding arrived third, and stayed. "Mr. Rossy," he said, with the strangled courtesy of a man performing composure over panic. I wasn't aware you and Clara were—" "Friends," Damian said. He let the word finish the sentence, and then let the sentence sit. "It was a joke," Derek said, with the laugh people produce when they know a laugh is the wrong instrument, but nothing else is available. "We have history. She understands. Right, Clara. We were always—" "Mr. Vance," Damian said. Derek stopped. "When a woman leaves a room because of something a man said," Damian said, low and deliberate, "it is not a joke, it is a policy. and policies, in my experience, have proportional consequences. Chloe Vanderwall said, Damian, in the tone of someone using a first name to establish history. Damian turned and looked at her. It was not a threatening look. It was more precise than that. The look of a man closing a door with complete certainty that it will remain closed. Chloe Vanderwall stopped speaking. Clara felt every eye in the room and kept her chin level and felt, for the first time in a very long time, exactly as large as she was. The shot came from behind the bar. The mirror behind the bottles disintegrated at shoulder height. The sound of the shot chased the impact by 3/4 of a second. Enough time for Damian to have already moved. His arm came around Clara, and his body positioned itself between her and the direction of the shot, and they were behind an overturned table before the screaming started. And Clara's heart was in her throat, but her hands were not shaking, because she did not have time for them to shake. Leon was already moving. She heard his voice. 2 words, directional, precise, and the sound of something resolved at the north end of the bar. The screaming was happening at full volume. Alderman Wallace's distinctive baritone could be heard crying the name of the Lord in a register it had not previously accessed. 20 seconds. Clara counted. Then Leon's voice again. Clear! Damian stood and extended his hand, and Clara took it, and he pulled her upright in one motion, and she found herself standing very close to him in the echoing wreckage of the ballroom's collective dignity. And the thought she had, clearly, despite the adrenaline, was that his heartbeat had not changed. Are you hurt? He said. No. She checked. Are you? No. Detective Harrison arrived with the particular energy of a man who had been at an event in an official capacity that he needed everyone to forget, and was now finding himself in an extremely official situation. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Damian. He looked at Clara. His eyes went to her name badge. Clara Jenkins, Ashford, and Blake, P.R. Something happened in his face. Jenkins, Harrison said, very quietly. Yes, Clara said. Is your father's name? He stopped, started again. Was your father Victor Jenkins? The cold wave moved through her with no warning. He was, she said. He died when I was 12. Harrison looked at Damian. The look that passed between them was compact and complex, and full of things Clara had not been told. She watched it happen with the pattern recognition part of her brain wide awake. What? She said. Not here, Damian said. What do you know about my father? She said. Harrison looked at his shoes. The car, Damian said. Please. It was the please, the specific weight of a man who almost never said it. She went. The SUV moved through Friday Manhattan like it knew which lights would change. Clara sat beside Damian in the back. Leon drove with the composure of someone who had heard worse news in worse cars and driven on. The privacy partition was up. Your father, Damian said, managed the financial architecture for my father's business for 11 years, 1988 to 1999. Clara felt the room change size. He structured accounts across 6 entities, 3 jurisdictions, 2 financial systems. He was genuinely extraordinary at it. He watched her face. In 1999, a rival operation tried to acquire those accounts. They offered him a substantial sum to provide access credentials. She already knew the end of this sentence. She had known it somewhere very deep, with the wordless knowledge of a 12-year-old who was told one thing and believed something else for 20 years. He refused, she said. He refused. Damian paused. He was killed on the 14th of March, 1999, made to appear as a traffic accident. The lights of Lexington Avenue moved across the window. The city continued its business. My mother told me it was a truck, Clara said, running a light. He did not suffer. I know that for certain. She pressed her fingertips to the window glass, cold and real and solid. She had done this since she was 12, found the edge of a surface and held it. The people who had him killed, she said, are they still? The original principals are dead. The operation continued under new leadership. He paused. Richard Vanderwall runs it now. The name landed in the car like a dropped weight. Chloe Vanderwall's brother, she said. Yes. Derek's girlfriend. Something moved through Damian's expression and was contained. Derek Vance has been on the Vanderwall payroll for 14 months. His attendance tonight was not coincidental. He was positioned near you specifically. Clara stared at him. Why? Damian reached into his jacket and placed on the seat between them a small black disc the size of a coat button. A faint indicator light pulsed. Leon found this 2 hours ago. It was embedded in a phone case. When did Derek give you a phone case? The answer was in her body before it was in her mouth. 6 months ago. He came to my office, said he wanted to apologize. He brought it as a peace offering, Damian said. Yes. Every conversation, every location, every meeting, for 6 months. She sat with this. Leon drove. The Brooklyn Bridge appeared briefly and was gone. What do they want from me? She said. Your father had a safety deposit box at First National Bank on Park Avenue. It was in his name. When his estate settled, it passed to you at 21. Do you have a box at First National? She turned to look at him fully. I received a letter. I couldn't. I filed it and I never. She stopped. I was 21. I couldn't deal with anything connected to him yet. Vanderwall has been trying to access it for over a decade. They believe it contains the access credentials your father managed. What those records contain would dismantle their entire financial infrastructure. A pause. They put Derek near you to eventually get you to retrieve the box without understanding what you were doing. Clara absorbed this. The city moved. Her mind moved with it. He was never interested in me, she said, and the sentence was not the pain she expected it to be. It was something much colder and much more useful. Everything he said, every time he talked about my body, my weight, all of it was destabilization. Keep me off balance so I never went looking in an old filing cabinet for a letter from a bank. Yes, Damian said. She looked at the partition ahead of her. I want to open the box tonight. Tomorrow morning would be. Tonight, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. She held his gaze. Whatever he found there, it apparently satisfied some condition. Leon, he said. Heard that, Leon said from the front, and turned north toward Park Avenue, because of course he had heard that. The night manager of First National owed Damian Rossy a favor that lived entirely in the unspoken economy of obligations that keeps a city running beneath its visible surface. The favor was called in at 11:44 p.m. on a Friday. The night manager was a reasonable man. He opened the private access room without asking questions that he understood he was not meant to ask. The box had not been opened in 22 years. Clara held the key. Her hands were completely still. She had decided somewhere between the car and the elevator to be the person her father had, apparently, believed she would become. the kind that could hold things. She turned the key. Inside, a sealed envelope, a USB drive with a sliding cover, early 2000s hardware. And at the bottom of the box, folded with the precise care of someone folding something to last, a handwritten letter addressed in her father's handwriting. She knew it from birthday cards, the last ones, which she still kept in a drawer in Brooklyn. To the name Damian. She looked up. Damian was looking at the letter. Something had happened to his face. Something open and young that she had not seen from him before. She picked up the letter. She held it for a moment, holding something her father's hands had held and folded and placed here for someone to eventually find. Then she held it out. He took it slowly. He read it standing, and Clara looked at the far wall and decided to continue looking at the far wall and give him whatever the moment required. A silence. Then, he says the USB contains the credentials. He structured them, so only someone with his personal key phrase can access them. The phrase is in the letter. His voice had altered, not broken. Altered the way a key changes tone when the temperature drops. He says he knew what was coming. He made arrangements for your mother's financial stability without connecting it to his actual work. He says he is sorry he couldn't tell her. A pause longer than the others. He says, "Tell me," Clara said. Damian looked up. His dark eyes were doing something that required no name. He says, "Tell her she changed the world by being exactly who she is. Tell her I watched her once, through the kitchen window, when she was 7 years old, sharing her school lunch with the neighbor's boy who hadn't brought one. She thought no one was looking. That is who she is. Tell her I always knew." The private access room at First National Bank on Park Avenue is an extremely unsuitable place to cry. Clara was fully aware of this fact. She cried anyway. The way you cry when 22 years of carrying something alone finally finds a witness. She stood in a bank vault, and she cried her father's words, and her own relief, and the enormous, exhausting smallness of what Derek Vance had tried to make her feel about herself for 3 years, when her father, who died at 41 to protect something he believed in, had seen her whole in a kitchen window when she was 7 years old, and never stopped knowing who she was. Damian did not try to stop it, or contain it, or shorten it. He stood close enough that she knew he was present, and he let it be what it was. When she was done, she pressed her palms flat on the table. Breathed, straightened. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Richard Vanderwall was arrested at 7:42 the following morning, at his apartment on the Upper West Side. The federal investigation that brought him in had been 3 years in construction and had been missing until 48 hours prior, a critical piece of documentation. That documentation was no longer missing. The financial records from Victor Jenkins's safety deposit box, combined with the architecture Damian's legal team had been quietly assembling, constituted what the lead prosecutor described later to a journalist who had bought him a good dinner as the cleanest financial dismantling he had seen in 20 years. Derek Vance attempted to leave the country at 9:15 a.m. He reached the business class gate at JFK before discovering that his passport had been flagged, his accounts were frozen, and the Vanderwall family had already released a statement describing him as a peripheral associate whose activities were entirely unknown to leadership. He was arrested in the security line, wearing a single carry-on, and the expression of a man who has spent his entire life believing that the right words to the right person could solve any situation, and has just discovered the precise limit of that belief. Chloe van der Wall cooperated with investigators with an efficiency that suggested she had been anticipating the eventuality. Arthur, Damian's accountant, and the source of the intelligence leak that had allowed the van der Wall faction to place the shooter at the plaza, was located in a hotel in Newark on Saturday afternoon, under a name that took Leon 4 hours to identify, and which Leon found personally insulting in its lack of imagination. Arthur's situation was resolved through channels that generated no paperwork and required no court dates. Jonathan Hayes, known in certain circles as the Jackal, the man who had taken the shot in the grand ballroom, was in federal custody before midnight. His testimony, offered with the remarkable speed of a man who had correctly assessed his available options, filled in the remaining gaps in the federal case with the thoroughness of someone hoping the completeness of his cooperation would be noted at sentencing. None of this appeared in the Saturday morning paper. Some of it appeared in the Sunday edition, worded with the careful precision of a reporter who understood which facts had been released and which had been permitted. Clara heard about Derek's arrest while sitting in her kitchen in Crown Heights eating scrambled eggs she had made badly on purpose, the way she sometimes did on Saturday mornings when she wanted to make something and not have it matter. She was wearing university sweatpants of 11 years standing, and a wool sweater with a small hole at the left cuff that she was not going to address. Roosevelt, her tabby, 8 years old, enormous, possessing the moral philosophy of a very small Roman emperor, was on the counter expressing his views on the quality of his breakfast through sustained eye contact. Her phone lit up, a number she had saved, somewhere around 2 in the morning, as DR, because she had not yet been ready to type the whole thing. The message read, "Done. Also, I found an adapter for the USB." A pause. Then, Roosevelt is an excellent name. Clara looked at her phone. She looked at the cat. She looked back at her phone. She typed, "How do you know my cat's name?" The reply came back in under a minute. "Leon ran a background on you 8 months ago, when your name came to our attention through the Van der Wall investigation." He included the cat. He also noted, and I am quoting directly, "She seems like the kind of person who is fine." A pause. Then, he was right. For what it is worth, Clara set the phone face down on the kitchen table. She picked it up. She looked at Roosevelt, who was now touching his paw to her coffee mug in the specific way that meant he had decided it should move. "Don't," she said. He moved it 1 millimeter toward the edge. "I will end you," she said. Roosevelt sat back, satisfied with the calibration of the interaction, and began to wash his face. Clara typed back, "Thank you, for everything, not just last night." The reply took longer this time. She was almost finished with her eggs when it came. Victor Jenkins was the best kind of person. Honest when it cost him something. Loyal when it cost him everything. The least I owe him is to make sure his daughter gets the ending he would have wanted for her. She read it 3 times. Then she put the phone in her pocket and went to stand at her kitchen window and looked at Crown Heights, waking up on a Saturday in October. The light coming sideways through the buildings. A woman on the sidewalk 3 floors down, walking a dog that was too big for city life, but seemed entirely at peace with the arrangement. Her father had watched her through a window when she was 7. He had known who she was. He had kept that knowledge somewhere safe, the way you keep a thing you need to find later. And 22 years after she lost him, it had found its way back to her in a bank vault on Park Avenue at midnight, with a man who carried his heartbeat steady through gunfire. Derek Vance had tried to make her feel small for 3 years, and she was standing in Crown Heights in a sweater with a hole in it, eating bad scrambled eggs, and she was the largest she had ever felt in her life. 3 months later, on a Tuesday morning in January, when the city had gone grey and the park was bare, Clara opened her apartment door to find Damian Rossy standing in the hallway with 2 coffees, looking exactly like a man who had made a decision and was presenting it for consideration rather than announcing it as settled. "I was in the area," he said. "You live on the Upper East Side," she said. "It is an extremely large area," he said. A pause. His jaw was set in the specific way she had learned, the way it got when he was working through something that mattered and wanted to get the words right, rather than just effective. "I would like," he said carefully, "to take you to dinner. With intention, stated intention, to be precise." "You have been taking me to dinner for 3 months," she said, "with ambiguity. I want to remove the ambiguity." Clara leaned against the doorframe. She looked at him. This man who had stood beside her in a bank vault and not tried to make her grief faster or smaller or more convenient, who had told her father's story to her face without looking away from the weight of it, who had texted her about her cat at 10 in the morning on the day his legal team dismantled a criminal financial network. "You can come in," she said. "I'll warn you about the cat." "He won't like me," Damian said, stepping inside. "He doesn't like anyone. He'll respect you eventually. That's more sustainable than being liked." From the kitchen came the sound of Roosevelt forming an immediate opinion about the guest. "I have managed," Damian said, with the precise, measured dignity of a man accustomed to federal investigations and international negotiations and things that happened in cars at night. Considerably more complex negotiations than a tabby. Clara laughed. The real one, the full one, the one that came from somewhere completely unguarded. "Give him the coffee lid," she said. "He likes to bat them around." Damian looked at her. Something settled in his face, something that had been held at exactly the right angle for a very long time, found its resting place. "Okay," he said. "There is a kind of man who, when he has decided to diminish you, begins with your body, because your body is present and undeniable, and he has decided it is the part of you he can reach. What he does not understand, what Derek Vance never understood, is that the body he was trying to reduce was the body of a woman whose father died to protect something he believed in, whose mother kept going in a small apartment in Akron on money she did not fully understand, who grew up to be exactly who she always was, in a kitchen window at 7 years old, and never stopped being that person for a single day of her life. Clara Jenkins did not need anyone to burn the world for her. The world already owed her. She just needed someone who knew it. Now come back down here. We are at the end of this story, and I need you to do something before you go. Drop a comment right now, before you even think about it. And tell me the moment in this story that got you. Was it the terrace? The bank vault? The text about the cat? Was it Victor Jenkins watching his daughter through a kitchen window and keeping it safe for 22 years? Tell me. I want to read every single one. Hit that like button if this story was worth your Friday night, or your Saturday, or whatever time of day it is wherever you are, and tell us where you are watching from in the comments, because this channel reaches people in Lagos, and London, and Atlanta, and Toronto, and Sydney, and cities I haven't named yet, and every single one of you being here matters more than I can say. Share this video with one person. One person who needs to hear a story about a woman who was told she was too much and turned out to be exactly enough. And if you are not yet subscribed to this channel, that button is right there, and it costs you nothing, and it means everything. Subscribe and come back for the next story, because this channel is just getting started, and what is coming next will stay with you.